Sports. Todd Leabo, Sports Radio 810, Kansas City. Chiefs are world champions again. And a dynasty, that's the word you use when you win 3 or 4 out of what they've done, 3 out of 5, and played at another one. Todd, thanks for your time. What's it like? Are people groggy from the celebration, or is everyone lit up right now?
Oh, there was definitely some grogginess today. The celebration was pretty wild last old hat, I guess. I mean, it seems old hat to us who have been covering them. It's like, okay, fine, this is what you do, blah, blah, blah. But it was pretty nice weather last night as well. So downtown Kansas City was pretty wild. People running around, having a good time. And the parade, I'm curious, the parade coming on Wednesday, I would think less people would go to that because the parade's a parade. It's really not. It's a big crowd of people. And, you know, they drive down the street and they yell and scream, and then they do the exact same speeches on stage. I guess the same number of people will go to that because it's going to be like 57 degrees on Wednesday. But I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go to it, but I'm working. So it's a different deal entirely, you know?
Todd, this was probably, in my estimation, the last year where for a while, this team will probably struggle on offense at any point because they'll probably get that fixed. And they still managed a way to do it. What is the appreciation in Kansas City for the reason they're able to do it, Patrick Mahomes?
Oh, he's off the charts. He could run for whatever office you wanted here. He is beloved by everybody because he does a lot of things right on the field, obviously, but he's also very good off the field. And he handles everything, you know, very classy manner. But, you know, you're right. I think this year it took him a while to figure the offense out, but then Rashee Rice has turned into like a blooming star. So it looks like they might have a guy listen, he may not be Tyreek Hill, who is, but they've just won 2 Super Bowls without Tyreek Hill. And they did what they got for Tyreek Hill turned into draft picks who have been very good players for them. So the appreciation for Mahomes is through the roof. And everyone last night just felt like if they got the ball at the end of the game, they were going to at least get a field goal, if not score a touchdown, which they did. And if the Niners were held to a field goal, there's no chance in the world they weren't going to get down and at least get a field goal. And they went and scored a touchdown. The belief is just there on that edge for Mahomes. And if that hasn't always been the case, listen, he's lost plenty of games. They lost 4 times at home this year. And they had a chance at the end of some of those games to do things, and it didn't come through. But the bigger the games got, the more important they got. They got first downs and did things. My doorbell is broken, by the way. There's nobody at my door. If you can hear the doorbell ring, it's going to ring like 4 times. I don't like it. But Mahomes just has been making those plays, and this was probably his crowning achievement last night, that he was able to get that done in that situation, because he didn't have one of those kind of drives yet in his career. And that's the kind of stuff that you dream about, you know, walking a Super Bowl off in the first ever overtime that went this far. So he's the king of Kansas City for sure.
Todd, everybody spent a week or 2 weeks talking up how they figured that game was going to go and who was going to win and all that. And we know San Francisco were slight favorites going in, and that was at least some partial motivating factor for Kansas City. But as far as the game itself, what stood out to you? I mean, you mentioned the ending obviously stands out in the comeback, but did that game, the matchup, kind of go about how you expected, or was there a little bit of a surprise there and how it all unfolded for you?
Well, I thought the Chiefs were in real trouble if they were going to be minus in turnovers. And it turned out they were even in turnovers, and they got a turnover that they scored on right away in one play, and they still had to go overtime. So I think I kind of read the game right that way, because the Chiefs aren't good enough. There were games in 2018 or 19 where they could be -2 in turnovers and win by 20 points. You know what I mean? They're not that on offense. They had to be clean on turnovers or even, and that's what they did for the most part in the postseason. I mean, they were +3 in turnovers against the Ravens and won the game by 7 points. You know, the 2019 Chiefs would have won that game by 4 touchdowns if they were +3. So they did all those things right. In the defense, Steve Spagnuolo, I thought, did a really nice job of dialing up the right pressures at the right time. They had 2 critical third down stops that led to the field goals at the end for the Niners. The one in overtime where Chris Jones burst through and Purdy ended up throwing it long. But even a bigger one was the one right at the 2-minute warning, because if the Niners had gotten a first down on that play, the game's over. They're going to be able to lead the clock out. The Chiefs use their 2 timeouts, and then maybe the kid misses a field goal, maybe he doesn't, but they're walking this thing off. and he brought Trent McDuffie on a blitz, and Purdy didn't see him coming, and McDuffie made the play and blocked the pass. Those were tremendous plays, and the Chiefs had done a really good job this year of figuring out the right time to make those blitzes. And it's so funny. Football is just weird. The Chiefs did not do a good job at the turnover ratio this year. And many times it was like they just couldn't pick the ball up. They wouldn't land on it. The ball's laying on the ground, and they couldn't pick it up. And last night, that was a very difficult fumble recovery on the punt that Jalen Watson dove on. You're running full speed. And George Karlaftis on the play where McCaffrey fumbled in the first drive didn't try to do anything stupid. He just dove on the ball. There were probably 3 times this year where a Chiefs player tried to pick the ball up and do something, and they fumbled it away, and the other team got the ball back. They got smart. I think they coached that. You can't coach turnovers. You coach the principles of it. And I think they had coached it. Listen, don't be a hero. Get the ball. The ball is more important than anything else. And those were big, big plays last night. Falling on the ball and those 2 big third downs. And that's what the Chiefs needed, because if they didn't make any one of those plays, they'd probably lose the game.
I saw numerous quotes and also the transcripts in the post game about what Kansas City and how for 2 weeks it was slammed into their head about overtime, that the rules were different in the Super Bowl. And then I was stunned to see where there were 49ers players that said they thought it was the regular overtime rules. Did that surprise you too?
Absolutely shocked me. I mean, that is 1,000% on the 49ers staff for not getting the rules across to their players. Patrick Mahomes has told us a few times in the last few weeks, I guess it's maybe Saturday night, they have this really boring meeting where they go over all this really mundane stuff. And sometimes guys zone it out, but he's like, it's important. All of it's important. This time, with this time left on the clock, this is the rule in overtime. You need to do this. This is how we play the game and the way we operate it. And the Chiefs, sometimes meetings can be boring, right? These guys just want to play football. They don't want to practice. They don't want to have meetings. But little details like that absolutely make a difference. Now, that's not why the Niners lost the game. They lost the game because they didn't make a stop, but they should know the rules. But I'm telling you guys, you get there and cover these athletes all the time. Guys on offense don't know what defensive players do. Guys on defense don't know what offense players do. Sometimes guys who play on the offensive line don't have a clue what someone is doing out on the wide receiver. They just kind of know their job and go about it. But that's a failure, and I think the Niners don't look very good right now with their players actively admitting they didn't know what was going on.
Todd, what is the biggest offseason issue you see for the Chiefs? Is it Chris Jones? Is it getting another wide receiver to match with Rashee Rice? They have decent amount of cap room, and you would think some guys like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, they could save $12 million after June 1st cut, might be on the outs anyway. What do you think they do?
Well, Chris Jones is obviously a big deal. Also is L'Jarius Sneed. L'Jarius Sneed was a late round draft pick. He's played 4 years. They could put a tag on him, but the cornerback tag is huge. That's a big number. I think they would like to have both of those guys on the team, but I'm not sure you can do that. They got a little bit of salary cap space, but maybe not enough for 2 mega contracts. In my mind, everyone I asked, if you had to have one or the other, Chris Jones is older than L'Jarius Sneed, but they all tell me, take the big guys. The big guys don't grow on trees. L'Jarius Sneed is a perfect example of, hey, here's the guy the Chiefs drafted in the 4th round who is playing at a Pro Bowl level. He's not the only one either. They got a lot of guys who they drafted late who have played really good for them at cornerback. You can't find how many guys in the league can do what Chris Jones does. 5, maybe. And so if you find a way to do something with Chris Jones, and I think he gets it. I don't know if you saw the video that the Chiefs put out on social media last night with Andy Reid basically on top of him on the field, yelling, how about that? I mean, Andy Reid's a big dude, and he was on the ground. They had to lift him off of him. I think he wants Chris Jones here, and I think Chris Jones, if he doesn't know it by now, he's seen a lot of guys leave. And Tyreek Hill's having a good time sitting in Miami, but he's been watching the Super Bowl 2 years in a row.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Chris Jones had the house in Miami. You know what I mean? He loves that town. But if he goes down there, they're not winning a Super Bowl. That team's not winning a Super Bowl. I think if you want to go to the Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl, hanging around Patrick Mahomes may be the smartest move that you can make because he seems to get there.
What about Andy Reid, who now has 3 Super Bowl titles, and there's a very short list to do of coaches, and he has been close so many times, had the great run in Philly, but not great enough, and then knocking on the door and eventually getting Mahomes in Kansas City to take the next level. Is he Is he a beloved figure? And then going back to Todd, when he arrived in Kansas City after a nice run in Philadelphia, was he the overwhelming favorite that people wanted, or was it somebody else?
Well, there were some doubts. I mean, I don't know who you would have hired. There were a lot of names out there at that point. But, things had fallen off the rails in Philadelphia. He'd gone 5-11, and he had the death of his son at training camp, all those things. It was almost like when he got hired, a lot of people were like, maybe you should take a year, you know what I mean, and chill. But here's the deal. I've been covering him since 2013 now. This is all the guy likes. He just likes football. He just wants to coach football. He just wants to draw plays up. He's got some interests outside of there, but you don't see Andy Reid running around town doing anything. He just likes football. And so when people keep asking him about retiring, he said it again this morning. He's like, I'm not going anywhere. I don't think he has any other interest. I don't know what he would do to occupy his time. This is what he does. Did you ever see Bill Belichick running around having fun, doing anything in the off season? No. This is what he did too. I mean, you guys cover the Big 12. Remember when Bill Snyder retired?
Yep.
It didn't take. He didn't have anything else to do, and eventually he came back. That's what I think Andy Reid is. But he's certainly beloved here. But you don't see him out and about. He's a very private person. So I think he's been seen in the wild about 3 times in Kansas City. He just works and grinds, and he goes to California for a little bit in the off season and sits in his office and draws plays up. And that doesn't seem like a very fun life for me. But if you're a football fan, that's exactly what you want your coach to do.
All right, Todd, if I went to the Kansas City City Council and said, I think you guys should have a Patrick Mahomes, and it's the City of Fountains, a Patrick Mahomes fountain that sits and overlooks the city like Christ the Redeemer, do you think it could get done?
Absolutely. They put it to a vote of the city council, the county legislature, the people, whatever it costs. Forget about the schools, forget about the police. They would all vote yes for it. I mean, it's unbelievable. And listen, you guys covered him. Did you think this was happening when he was at Tech? I didn't. I watched the guy lose a whole bunch of football games at Tech. Now, he was always the best player on his team and didn't have enough talent around him, but I had no clue that he would be this good. But they saw something in him that at least 9 teams in front didn't see. And it's just happy he's here, and he just pushes all the right buttons, like I said. I mean, he owns part of the Kansas City Royals. He owns part of Sporting Kansas City, the MLS team here. His wife owns part of the NWSL team here. He put $250,000 for this city to have the College Baseball Hall of Fame that's going to open in a couple of years. There's no reason for the College Baseball Hall of Fame to be here. It should be in Omaha. But Kansas City won the bid probably because Patrick Mahomes is behind it. I mean, the guy, everything he does just works. It's amazing to me that this is where it is. And I've lived here my whole life. For 50 years, this football franchise never did anything. And now there's going to be another parade, and it's almost boring. Almost.
In fact, they won, what was it, Super Bowl IV when they beat the Vikings, and never – I mean, there were some teams that were pretty good, but you're right.
No, they made one AFC championship game in that whole time. And here's my life, okay? So that game happened on January 11th, 1970, the 69 season. I was born on February 1st, 1970, so I was not alive. I was 3 weeks from being born, and I spent my 50th birthday in Miami, Florida, the day before they won their first one in 2019, 2020 season. And I thought that was going to be like, wow, it took 50 years and they won it, and I covered it and it was there. And now they've been 3 more times and won 2 more Super Bowls. And it seems like that was yesterday, but it just keeps going. And we asked everyone on Radio Row this past week, how many Super Bowls is this guy going to win? And nobody said 2 because he already had 2. Everyone was like 5 or 6 or 7. There doesn't really seem to be an end in sight for this. Now, remember, Tom Brady went 10 years without winning one.
Yep.
So there could be some sort of a drought. They win a couple times, but they didn't win them. So you can't take it for granted. It's very difficult to do. But if you start with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, you're starting ahead of everybody else in the AFC to get there. And if you just get a couple of breaks and the right things happen, then you can go the rest of the way and win this thing. And it's funny, Patrick is a very dedicated and driven guy. And you ask him something about it, I mean, he will bring up the fact that he's 0-2 versus Tom Brady in the postseason. And so, like catching Tom Brady, he made it harder on himself by losing to him twice, and he'll never get a chance to beat him. So I think in his mind, he's going to have to win like 8 Super Bowls to even consider that he's better than Tom Brady. And even if he won 6, he'd be, God, I lost twice to Tom Brady. He could already be tied with Tom Brady had he beaten him in those games. And Tom Brady would have 2 less, and he could have 2 more.
I was at the one in Tampa, the Super Bowl, when Brady was with the Buccaneers, and I mean the Buccaneers defense just harassed him.
It was bad. The Chiefs offensive line had lost 4 starters.
Yep.
And everyone in Kansas City was like, what's no big deal? They got Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill. And he ran around like a crazy man, throwing sidearm passes off people's face masks, and they just couldn't catch him. It was just an awful night. But, that resets you and says, hey, you've got to get your mind right and do things a little bit differently. And they were able to shore up that offensive line and get some better players. But that was an awful deal. When you lose both of your tackles, and then, lost Eric Fisher, the left tackle, in the title game right before that. And it was a rough night. But, that one right there is going to sting him forever. And that's how Mahomes is. He might win 6 and he'll go, God, Brady beat my brains out that one time. You know what I mean? And it will stick with him. But that's what competitors are like. You don't think it bothers Tom Brady to lost to the Giants twice?
Sure.
He's like stinking Eli Manning, who only made the playoffs like twice in his life. That freaking bothers Tom Brady. And he's the best of all time.
He lost to Nick Foles. I had to watch that one in person.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, that one just has to chap his ass in a way that I wouldn't imagine.
Oh, for sure. I mean, but then again, in my mind, Brady should thank his lucky stars he won his first 3 because he didn't do much in most of the games, but they won him. You know what I mean? And Patrick hasn't played all that great in the Super Bowl. He threw for 300 yards last night. That's the first time he's done that. He was pretty pedestrian in the first win over the Niners, threw a couple interceptions. And against Philly, he was hobbled last year. They needed a defensive score. But they just do all those things the right way. He doesn't have like Joe Montana's Super Bowl numbers. I mean, he threw another pick last night, a horrible pick. Threw a couple in the first one. His quarterback rating, which I don't love that number. His QBR last night was off the chain. But his quarterback rating has not been great in Super Bowl. But he's a quarterback, and they win the games. And he's won 3 Super Bowl MVPs, and he's stuck in Disney World right now, or Disneyland. Bleary-eyed. He looked so tired at the press conference this morning at 8:30 Vegas time. Oh, my God. Up all night, and they make you go to that press conference because you won the MVP. It's almost like, I don't want to win the MVP. Send somebody else.
Send somebody else. What's great about it is that the fact that, he did throw for 300 yards, but almost 5 quarters. But that's not to take away that when they needed the drive to the end of regulation and they needed the drive in overtime, he led them 75 yards both times to win it. And he is
with his
special.
arm and his leg.
Yep, and I was going to bring that up. He's not known as a Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or someone like that, but the one thing about him, about 2 to 5 times a game, he comes up with that run, and it's not like it's blazing, but he's an athlete, and he came up with a few of those, I thought, yesterday or last night in the fourth quarter when they needed it the most. He's
just fast enough to give – people take bad angles on him. I mean, Fred Warner is as good as it gets. And the longer run there, it was in overtime. Warner just took a terrible angle, and he got like 10 more yards. So he's just fast enough. He knows just when to run. And like the 4th and 1 play in overtime, he's like, I'm keeping the ball. And, he just did it. So he's smart when it comes to those things. It's amazing. You run out of words for it. You really do. It's wild. And you just pinch yourself because it had been 50 years. And who's to think it's going to end? But like we said this all the time, like Aaron Rodgers is a great player. He's only gone to 1 Super Bowl, and he's not going to another one. I don't think the Jets are going to a Super Bowl. So you just got to take it. You got to be thankful for every one you get. And I tell people all the time, just enjoy a game in October. Don't get too complacent when you just want to get to the Super Bowl. You have to enjoy going to Arrowhead Stadium and watching this guy play because it will end someday. It may be 15 years from now or something like that, but it's going to end. And whoever they get next, it ain't going to be as good. No. It's just not going to be as good. Look at the Patriots. They couldn't make the playoffs anymore. They're running through quarterbacks like nobody's business.
Clark Hunt at the top, obviously Reed, and then what they do as an administration, and also then to have the Reed and then also Patrick Mahomes. The alignment they have in that organization and franchise is amazing. Thank you, Todd. Enjoy it. Appreciate your time. Good luck covering that parade. And
all right, we'll and rain. We'll be good to go. I think we have good weather coming. That's the most important part.
I hope so. I do hope so. That's Todd Leabo, joined us, Sports Radio 810, one of the longest-running sports radio shows in the country out of Kansas City as they celebrate the Chiefs winning 4th overall, 3rd in 5 years with Patrick Mahomes.
Here we come.